Hi guys, my name is Krista Quintanilla. I graduated from TAMU in 2018 with a bachelor's in arts and a minor in marketing. And currently, I'm working on some paintings for my residency for Cultivarte, Laredo, and it's going to be called the series Degrees of Pressure. And I'm really excited for this, and I feel like it's more like a little bit more like who I am, kind of like really expressing like all my fears and all my hopes and ambitions.
All right, that sounds really interesting. I'm Sonya Marie Sky. I graduated from TAMU actually in 2013. For a few years, I was working as an art teacher at an elementary school in San Antonio. And then I was like, you know what, like I'm gonna go back to school. So I went back to school. I was at UTSA getting my MFA. I graduated in May 2020. My last semester was a mess because that's when COVID happened. In my graduate program, I was really exploring like concepts more than technique. Graduate school really pushed me to my limits as an artist. What they first told me like in my semester was like, all right, well, okay, so you can draw and paint. What can you say with it now? Like I had to really think about, well, what do I want to say with it? But on top of that, pushing myself as an artist using different materials. So I had to get out of my comfort zone and experiment a lot with different mediums. So I still do like drawings and paintings, but I took it to another level in grad school, like portraits like of a figureless woman, like not just using like drawings, but like drawing with like fabric. So I did like collage, and it's like I want it to be like life size. And then I went to like a bunch of other things. And then I went to like dressmaking, and my work is just mostly female based, coming like from like whatever experiences I've gone through or like women around me have.
Yeah, I think that I feel like I'm still kind of in that like paint, like I'm still like learning like the techniques of painting and like where I'm gonna go with that part. I think the series is really challenging me because I would do like just a lot of like things that I thought were cool. You know, I did a lot of paintings in my undergrad, like when I was at TAMU, just things that I thought would look nice and things that you kind of just were just like irrelevant. I think like I did a lot of like horror work for a long time, and just like kind of like just shock stuff, you know, just because I was like good at drawing, but like, you know, but I was not like you can be good like you said, like what are you trying to say, you know? So I think like right now I'm really going through that process of like, well, what is inside of me, like what do I want to like, where do I want to go from here? So I think this work is similar to what I've done before, and like because like I've said before, I do a lot of anime. I love character work and stuff like that. So I wanted to bring that into my work, you know, because I love portraits and I love painting people, but I wanted to make them more dynamic and less like just pretty, you know, because I felt like as a person, like I've never felt pretty, and I feel like that's like always hit me really hard. Like I've always wanted to like accentuate that, like that wasn't the only thing that mattered, like in my work, that women are more than just like how we look. So I really wanted to like accentuate that like in this series. And I feel like that's what I did a lot like with my other work, but I feel like now that I'm like getting away from like drawing like from other references, you know, like other characters and other people and famous people, like now I feel like I'm coming into myself. I slacked a lot when I was in college, and I feel like I really felt that once I got out of college as an artist, because I was like, wow, like I'm not really like where I thought I was at until like I started doing my like the work on my own.
Like I feel like I could have challenged myself a lot more, but I didn't know, like I didn't have that many experiences. And I did, the little bit that I had was thankfully to like one of our professors there. I don't know if you ever had her. She hasn't been there in a few years. Her name was Miss Foreign. And
I knew Miss Foreign. She was really cool.
Yeah,
I got to know her.
My favorite. Yeah, she was great. So she's the one who like really pushed me. She's the one who actually like wanted, like I wanted to be a professor because of her. I wanted to like follow in her footsteps. And she was the one who was like telling me like, you should think about grad school. If she didn't tell me, I would have never thought about it. Like I just would have been like, oh, I'm just gonna do my art thing on my own. But she's the one, like, she's like, I really see something in you. Like, why don't you think about going to grad school? And I'm like, well, what's that? And like, what is it gonna, like, how is it gonna serve me, like, in my career and all these things. So she was kind of like a mentor for me, like, there at TAMU, besides like the other professors, right?
Yeah, Miss Hart. Oh man, I really enjoyed Miss Heartline when I had her. I enjoyed her. I think like also, I was surprised that a lot of people like, because I went to VMT, so I had already had like a lot of experience like in critique, which was I found very hard to do at TAMU sometimes because I felt like it was just difficult because I felt like people hadn't been exposed to like what a real critique is like, you know, and I feel like you get that like kind of more like when you're like in a more serious studio, you know, so it was very interesting. It was like kind of like a shock to me sometimes.
Yeah, like I'm curious to see like how you wanted to like explore women related issues because I have a background in that, but like I want to see like where you're coming from and why women.
Well, like as a woman and as like a former child, like I think you see a lot of stuff like in the culture, you know what I mean? You see a lot of stuff in the border culture and machismo, and it's always been very interesting to me. I've also like experienced like some of my family like in Mexico who have experienced a lot of violence, you know, so I feel like that's really sad. That's on my behalf. Like I feel that's a very sad like connotation that like I'm a Mexican American or I'm like a Latina American, and I haven't gone to like, and I live right on the border and I don't go to Mexico because I'm afraid of like personally I'm afraid of like femicide and like just looking like out of place and looking like a target and stuff like that. So I feel like I've always wanted to talk about those things, you know, because I feel like those are things that have kind of always like, I don't want to say warped my life, but have always like enclosed me. You know, like my parents were always like protective, like in the sense that like, hey, like don't be going out at this time, or you know, don't be walking by yourself because someone's gonna come and get you and stuff like that, you know, or come and hit you from behind. And like I'm like stop, like that's enough. But and then like, but as things have happened to me, and like I am the person that I go by myself, and things have happened to me, and thank God, like I've never been assaulted, but I have been followed, and I have like I've seen things, you know, like it's really real out there. So I just think like I wanted to highlight like, because some people think like I'm crazy talking about that stuff, but I think people are fortunate that that has never happened to them, or they haven't known somebody that that has happened to, you know. So that's really what I wanted to highlight in this series.
Yeah. No, I think that's extremely important because like that's where I'm coming from. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you were talking about. Like that's exactly what I've experienced. My family has always been very protective of me and like you can't go out because you're a girl. Even at my age, just recently, like I was visiting Laredo and like I was out all night, you know, partying or whatever. And then my grandpa made it a big deal. Like he was like, he told me like really ugly stuff that
Yeah,
because like, you know, what are you doing going out? Like you're a woman, like, and it's just like, no, why can't I just be out with my friends? And then also something like I focus on, and maybe you can think about too, is the double standards. Why is it okay for the males in this culture to do whatever they want, but
mm-hmm.
women can't? Like, oh no, like that's a no-no. Like we're so oppressed, like here in this
Mm-hmm.
culture. And that's
Yeah,
something that like in my work, like I'm going towards talking about power. How do we use different things as a woman, as a female, as a Latina, and turn that into power and not be oppressed anymore, but make that into strength? And so I get that fear from our families, like to
mm-hmm.
always protect ourselves. And that's something that every woman I've ever spoken to, especially here, like even my mom is like, she's so proud of me for always standing my ground. And like I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot more courage than she ever did with like her parents, because her parents like are from Mexico, and like, you know, that comes from like machismo culture where it's like
Mm-hmm.
the man rules, it's a man's house. And then my girlfriend Gabby, like she's also another artist in San Antonio, she taught me the word marianismo, where it's like the women feed into that machismo culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
that's my grandmother, and I'm like, I love her to death, but she feeds into that. That's something that like in my work, and like I can see that like maybe that's where you're coming from too. So that
for
makes
sure.
me really interested in your work, and I'm excited to see the direction that it's going to go towards, because especially for South Texas, we need a lot more of that. Like we need more
Mm-hmm.
artists like us is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yes, we do. I don't know, like we've always grown up with like, and I personally love a lot of male artists. I'm a big Frank Frazetta fan. I'm a big like Diego Rivera fan. I just love all the intricate work that they have. But I think a lot about how I feel like women don't have kind of like that input in narrative. You know, we don't have like there's like a lack of like documentation from women, you know, and I feel like my goal is to be like honest in that documentation. As like being oppressed as an oppressed woman, I think that we are still like in this old 1950s kind of thinking of like how you said, how girls should not be alone, how things are like, I still feel like a lot very backwards here, even though I feel like we have a university and all this stuff. I still think like things are like just small town attitudes. And I'm very surprised, I think. And I think that machismo, going back to that, I can feel that a lot in my family, because I feel like my mom and my dad are still like, they're like an older generation. So I feel like they're always on that attitude that, oh, you're never going to leave this house unless your boyfriend takes you out of this house. Like, I really hope not to live their lives again.
Exactly what you were saying with like, if you want to leave the house, you're going to like move out with a boy. You can't move out on your own. That's exactly what my family said. But if like, for example, like thinking of like double standards, like if my Theo wanted to leave the house, it's like, all right, mijo, like go have fun. And it's funny because like a lot of the males like stay in the family because they're well taken care of, but the females have to like serve the men and things like that. I'm glad that like San Antonio for me is like has been very welcoming and open to a lot of subjects, and especially like being in South Texas, especially like being a Latina and like the LGBTQ like community, like it's been very receptive to all of that. And I've heard like outside of San Antonio and like in other cities, it's not always like that. It is like very male dominated, even still like in New York or whatever. And that's unfortunate. Like I think like there's even in the art world, there's still that traditional background, like history, where it's like even in the art world it was male dominated. Like you go to art museums and you look at all the artists, 90% of them are like men, not too many are women. And that's what like the Guerrilla Girls talk about. That's something that, again, which is why like every time I'm really excited about this artist talk, because like we're both female artists, and like I mentioned before, the more female artists that come up and talk about their experiences, the more our voice will be heard overall, hopefully in South Texas, but also like going up north. Like I'm glad that other artists are talking about Latinas, but how about like it's time for Latinas to talk about Latinas?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Like I'm tired of reading a book by somebody else about us, and I'm just like, wow, like we should be there, you know? Like it's just sad that I feel like we have to fall into like yeah, you can have a dream and you can have like your desires, but remember that you always have to come back and be a mom. Like you have to give up all that and you know, take care of a family and raise kids.
if there's a will, there's a way. If you really want it bad enough, you can get it, but you have to like work for it. Like the art world is extremely competitive, but you also have to be proactive and get those opportunities, like what you're doing now with the residency. Like I'm sure you had to apply and like you had to be proactive, and like if you wanted it, you're in this position now talking to me. So like
Yeah.
if you want something, you can get it. That would be my advice for like other young Latino artists that want to go into this field. There are success stories. A lot of artists, I'm not gonna lie, like have to hustle to get to where they want to do all these shows, to have the time to make the artwork. After school, it's like finding the studio space, making your own space. If you're there at the house, like in your little room, 1-bedroom apartment, you just have to make it work if you really want it. And that's where I'm at too. Like that's an advice like I'm thinking to myself, because right now because of personal experiences, like I'm kind of jumping around city to city, so I don't have a permanent space to work. Like, and that's kind of like the only thing I really can do is just work in a sketchbook. But like the goal is to continuously work.
For sure. I definitely feel on the little space I work from my room directly. I wish I had more experience. I wish, and I hope to eventually get myself like a studio, because you're definitely right. Like on the working space, even working from home, and that I have everything set up at home, but then like my other needs come up, like my family needs, my personal needs, and it takes away from that. I think it takes away from like the actual time that I can be like, hey, like I'm gonna study this and work on this, and no distractions from here on out, you know. And I think a studio space really like gives you the opportunity to do that, because when I was at TAMU, like I feel like I would go to the studio space and not waste any time, you know. And I tell you, I took a lot of things for granted until like, yeah, like I was on my last semester and realizing that I'm not going to have this space anymore. And it was great because nobody was ever there. Like if it was a couple, like 1 or 2 students, and they would we would interchange the rooms, but otherwise it was really great. And I hope that through like Cultivarte that I keep doing more stuff. I used to think having like a degree was like what mattered, but it's not. It's like the work that you put in. Because I was real arrogant to think that no, I can do this project. No worry, right? And then I got down to the project and completely ruined it. And I yeah, like completely ruined the project. And it was a paid project. I'm not going to specify who, or what. But it was a big learning experience. So I thought, like I'm out here, like with a degree, I'm out here, like telling people I'm an artist, and like, but what am I really doing? Like, what am I really like showcasing for it? Like, what did art school teach me? Or like, what did I take away from art school? You have to have a plan, and you have to execute it, and you have to do it right. Like, it's not just about, is it going to look pretty or not? Like, it's like a whole executed plan.
I think it's going to sound weird, but that's a good experience to have. I never want to think like, oh, I'm such a great artist, because I've seen a lot of artists think that, and then it hits them hard. It really hits their ego when they fail. You're going to fail, and you're going to fail so many times, but that's okay, because that's part of being an artist. If you're failing, you're learning. You're learning from your mistakes. But I had to learn to fail a lot of times to be able to be like, all right, you know what? It's not a big deal. Just start all over again. It's healthy to fail, and fail a lot.
It's not always about like how the picture looks, but I think it's about how complete your idea is. I thought everything has to look like they expect like a certain thing, but really what they wanted was like me to paint.
Finding that voice like for the style is like, for me, I have a lot of different influences, and then from looking at all those influences, like Frida Kahlo, and then also my more morbid side, like Jonan Vasquez, and like he did like Johnny the Homosexual Maniac, and like Invaders, and all that, and then like Tim Burton-esque style. Like I have a lot of different influences that I really liked, and then more traditional ones were like, I like Leonardo da Vinci, and like old school Renaissance artists. Like I wanted to combine something like that, but my style like has always been like a certain color scheme too. Sometimes it's very dark, and then sometimes it's just like I want it to be as realistic and gritty as possible, like my large charcoal drawings. Yeah, so I just had to find my voice through a lot of different influences and just kind of channel those in, and then eventually it just becomes into like a specific style. Like my red dresses that I was working on, like it kind of manifested from like back when I used to doodle with like red and black Sharpies, and then to like red and black paintings, to like just minimal like black and white charcoal drawings, and then back to like red dresses, but like now using like fabric. So that's kind of like interesting that a lot of artists find their voice or their style like in a lot of different ways. It could also be like through personal experiences too. Like for us, like focusing more like on female figures, and that's also like just having from our personal experience.
Yeah, it's because like you said, like we said earlier, I think we're women. Like who else are we going to relate to, besides other women, and their stories. I really like what you said earlier about where you get your inspiration from, because like I feel like for me, I think that the color schemes that I use a lot are like primary colors. I often find myself thinking a lot about Steven Spielberg, a lot. And I think that's where a lot of because I love Jurassic Park. I love Meetings of the Third Kind, when they go to that alien thing. I just love stories, I think, that are just really real, that they're so fake and so crazy, but the people in those stories are just so normal, and like they're just put like in kind of like in the situation they've never been in. So I think that just the imagination part for me is also just very like, I think that inspires me the most, and I think that also like I also love Hayao Miyazaki movies, for just for the aspect that most of the time it's always like a young girl who comes out like in the forefront. Like it shows you just like a little bit more of like who you could be, like who you are, and I really find those like talks, or those not talks, but I want to say I really find those aspects interesting, and also that these men are putting like women like on the forefront for that, that the girls are not just like victims, that they're also like active participants in like what's happening, you know, that they're problem solvers and they're just as brave as the guys that like are next to them, you know, or like leading role, like they're not damsels in distress, you know. So that those are things that I really look forward to like in media, and I hope to also like contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, and I think like there are a lot of male artists in our community, like in Laredo and like South Texas, that are really talented. They're really great, but it's like something to kind of think about. It's like, man, like how do we have more female artists kind of come more to the forefronts of like our border town and like South Texas? That's what, again, like why I like that we're doing this artist talk, and that's why like I try to, like, I think it's good for other like young Latina artists to like watch this, or even like follow other contemporary artists that are out there and trying to do the same thing. And like, and I'm trying to like, I'm thinking of other artists like I wanted to mention, but I can't, and that's a problem. Like if we can't think of like female artists right now, besides Frida Kahlo, but it's like no, like contemporary ones, like other female artists.
Mary Cassatt's the only other artist that we know, you know, like so
Yeah.
I actually saw, it was funny that we mentioned that. I saw this other woman, her name was Alice Dealey. Don't quote me, but I really, she had some very interesting art about contemporary art back in the 1970s. And I think that I just wanted to say this about her. I think that she was very right on what she was doing in the 1970s. She was doing contemporary art and working on unfinished art. And I thought that was such an interesting concept that she had done, that she said that unfinished art was eventually going to be the new contemporary art of the 2000s. I had just seen that on a BBC the other day. So I thought that was something that I'd like to mention. And again, it's a shame that I don't remember her full name.
Kara Walker, Judy Chicago. Kiki Smith is a really good one. Kiki Smith is a really good one. There are a lot of like female artists, but it's like even Yoko Ono.
Yoko Ono
has like,
oh my god.
Yayoi Kusama has a really cool exhibition at the McNay currently. That's why I'm like, I know them, but like, but it's just like even in school, like looking through the art history books, like unless you're specifically studying like contemporary female artists, like which there is a class on, like in a typical art history class, like I didn't remember like an undergrad like that many, not until like grad school, and that's why like again, like I keep on going to like a good artist friend of mine who's actually like, she's doing really good. She's already gotten into a lot of different shows throughout like the country. Gabby Cruz, she does like these large scale blankets. She's a photographer, and like she does self portraits of herself, like reinvented as like the Virgin Mary, a lot of saints, because she always wanted to see female figures in those saints, like coming from like a Catholic like culture, and like her work's really interesting. So I think you would like what she's doing, because she's like very in the same like scheme of like culturally like trying to reinvent like our view on women and men and like those double standards. We need more female artists, Latina female artists, especially in
I definitely feel. I feel like a lot of men, like they can do a lot of self-portraits and put themselves in these really like interesting moods, you know, like they can be powerful and they can be like sensitive and they can be sad and they can be pensive. And I feel like women, from the contrast, like I've seen a lot of women who are mostly just like sexy and pensive, you know, but I've always found that never like powerful, and even if when they're powerful, there's still like this sensuality to them, you know. And it's not that women are not sensual beings, but I would like to see like I love old school art. Like I love pictures of Joan of Arc. There you go. There's a very famous drawing of Joan of Arc that I really like, and she just looks so crazy, like in the whole outfit, like with the sword, and she's got like this chain link on her, and I just think like, man, like I want to put my face on that too, you know, like. And it's interesting, you know, because I feel like men can draw themselves and put themselves and take pictures of themselves with all like guns and you know, and be on top of a mountain and stuff like that, and they're powerful, you know. And I feel like that's just something that I would like to recreate for like all types of women, you know, not just like a certain type of woman, you know, or a certain type of like woman that fits into this category, you know, that a woman can be like any type and like still be in like that place of power.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's something like I'm still exploring, and I can see myself exploring for like the next like 5 years, like for a while longer. Like there's still a lot for me to explore of like power. Like something in my thesis was like talking about that sensuality was like how to like, yes, like it's a form of the male gaze, like it's for supposedly it's for them, but then I also like was thinking about like the female gaze in the context where females judge females. Oh, like, oh my God, she's dressed like a slut and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's not okay either. And that's something that I was like thinking of like in my thesis was just how do we turn that into a power? Because like, and I was thinking of that like historically, like I did a good amount of research. It's been like over a year, keep in mind. I like the idea of like having like the female figure like in a place of power. Yes, she can look sensual, but that's also her power. Like the last project I was working on was like a giant dress tent, which unfortunately I didn't get to finish. But it's like that idea, like it's like a 12 by 12 like giant, like people are able to like enter it, and like entering like the female like a woman's dress is like a whole nother thing. It opens a lot of doors to a lot of different kinds of conversations. So I don't know, I just like that was something I was thinking about. But like I think like for both of our works is just how do we elevate ourselves, how do we put ourselves in things that we've been wanting to see ourselves in.
Yeah, I think that people get really intimidated when you're like really outspoken. You know, I think I've been outspoken all my life, and I like to thank my dad for teaching me how to be outspoken, you know, and being difficult. You know, I think that's the thing that people think, that I'm very like difficult to talk to, and it's not that I'm difficult, it's just that like I have a lot of emotion, you know, and I deeply believe in the things that I'm talking about. Just owning, like not letting people like walk all over you when they're talking to you is like is the biggest part, you know, and because like you said, like being here in Laredo, I think like there's a lot of like machismo and no, you're wrong, and like that's not how it is, you know. But I think like that when you do your own research, like that gives you your power.
And this city, like it sucks. Like I'm very bittersweet about where I grew up in, you know, like I love Laredo because like there's a lot of culture. It's so rich. But I also have like it's very problematic for that reason. Like I've grown up my whole life, not just me, but like my friends, my mom, everybody has a story about like being catcalled, about God, you know, like unfortunately a lot of girls have gotten assaulted. They've been like grabbed, you know, at the bars or whatever. And it's like that's also a problem because like their fathers teach them to do that. They see that from their theos, from their fathers, and like it's okay to treat girls that way, and it's not okay. Like so every time like these guys come across a strong female, they're just like, oh well, she's a bitch, like she's crazy. And it's like, no dude, you're gross. You're being
Hell yeah. I think there's a lot of guys that actually don't like me for that very reason. People will often like call me a marimacha, like and in that way, like, you know, because I don't like take their advances. Like I think marimacha, he's like trying to degrade me in that sense. He's like, oh, like so you're a marimacha, like you think you're a guy too, you know, like not just that I'm not interested, but that I also like am putting on that I'm like stronger than him and all this stuff. Oh, that was so degrading, I think, in more aspects than one, you know, because I felt like I was really like starting to like come to know who I was, and I think that was like, I don't know, like I just did not expect that from especially from that person, you know. And I think like you said, like their parents teach them to do those things, and you're right, like you learn what you see, and it's a shame that there are like a lot of good people with great qualities, but then there's like all these like inner qualities. And I also think that things that men have to go through also, that like
they have to be, they're taught to be a certain way.
They're taught to be like that to survive.
They can't show weakness, like, oh, you're a girl, you're like this and that. Like if you cry, you show your weakness. And I'm like, that's not okay. That's not healthy for them.
That's not healthy.
That's the other side. So like,
and I'm gonna take a little bit of turn here. My cousin actually got killed when we were very young. Like they shot him, and I actually find it very surprising that an older man shot him. My cousin was 17 years old, and he got shot by a 35-year-old man. Yeah, over a 16-year-old girl. And I think like that was like the first time like my parents really had to like be real with me, you know, because like I knew my cousin very well. Like he would come to our house and he would come do stuff with us, you know, and it kind of like took the security away from me, like, you know. And I think like from there, like I really started to realize like why my parents were always so scared of a lot of stuff, you know, because like they grew up in a very, I think like a very violent kind of culture. Like going back to machismo, my mom's brother killed her own brother actually with a gun, also by accident, which is I think very like those things really like were like really like in my psyche when I was young growing up. Like the whole time like these stories would always come up. And I think like they were boys, you know, like they were guys, you know, like guys should be safe or guys should be this. So if guys were not safe, if these guys were not safe, like what chance is there for me to be safe, you know? So I think growing up that stuff was like really like in me. And I think that using the guns in this like or what I'm trying to represent is that like women are also on the forefront of like this violence, you know. There's like going back to the violence, I think that there's a lot of violence that's happening. I think that women are not like represented in that. We're seen as victims, you know. And I think a victim can be anybody, you know, through any circumstance. And I think that the most important part is like when you have a gun, that's what I mostly want to use, is that I've been using it like, you know, using one since and like practicing with my dad since I was like a little girl. Like that picture of Bella that I did, I can remember picking up a gun earlier than I remember like picking up like colors just like to draw, you know. Yeah, like, and not like a crazy gun, but we would shoot BBs and all that stuff. And but he really made it a point that this was something that was going to help me in the future, that if something was to ever happen to me, like that I would be prepared. And I'd be like, no dad, like I don't need one. Like I'm fine. Like, you know, I even took up boxing. I even took up Muay Thai boxing to like be prepared for like, you know, going out and doing stuff, you know, by myself. I know I may sound crazy, but that's my phobia, you know, like how easy it is for somebody to come up from behind and just like knock me over, for someone to come and shoot me. And I think people think like I'm crazy for thinking that. But I feel people have never been put in that position, like of being scared, like, you know, like of seeing like the gun there, seeing a gun pointed at you. And I've also had a gun pointed at me, and it's ugly. Like it's not a feeling like you can get away from, you know. And I think that, so I think those are things that like I'm trying to reiterate in this. And that like, going back to that, like when you have the gun is powerful, and when the gun is pulled out, that means that people are going to die, you know. And I think that's what I want to relate in that it's not like if you have it for a purpose, you know, like for whatever purpose that is. But I would like to think that as women, like we could change the narrative on that and use them for good. That's a side of women that people don't often talk about. You know, I think it's very hard for women to like to see their sons die, and it's very hard to see your brothers die, your cousins die.
Yeah, everything that you're saying, it's like two sides of a coin. And I think from a one woman's perspective, we have to use it for defense, but we also know the other side, and like having that grief. And it's like having that at the same time, it's a lot to go through. And it could happen to anybody, like for sure. But that's something like, why is it that like guys aren't normally scared to walk on the street alone? Girls are. A lot of women that I know like do have self-defense at home. Like they do have guns, they know how to use them. Like we do have to train ourselves. That's a really strong symbol and icon for you to use in your work for a lot of different reasons. Like that, just that in your work can open a lot of different kind of conversations, like in your personal experience.
And I personally could live without them. Personally, like just personally, like it's just very, it's a very interesting. I find the gun to be a very very interesting tool, because it's like the nuke. Its only purpose is to cause harm and destruction. Nothing more. Like even like shooting, like even targets. You're like, yeah, that's cool, but like its real purpose, you know, is to shoot something and kill something, you know, eventually, you know. So I find that a very very interesting like instrument, I guess, you know. Or like even like I feel like it's become kind of like the phone to some people. It's kind of like attached to their person, you know. So I find that economy also very interesting.
So yeah, so is that the direction that your work is going to take now? Is like you like, is it going to be showing up in your series a lot more, or just in one specific piece?
Well, it's gonna, in these 3 pieces that I'm doing, it's all of them are gonna have to do with the gun. And yeah, and I would like to get more like into the gun, like, you know what I mean. I would like to get into more aspects of kind of like
Deconstructing.
there you go, deconstructing the gun, and kind of like looking at its parts, you know, because I've also often heard like as a gun referred to as a woman, like cars are referred to like, oh, like she and her. And I also find that really interesting. It's such a powerful weapon, but then it's also got this connotation of being a woman, like the person's in love with it, you know, like that's his baby. So those are things I also like would like to explore with that.
It's unfortunate, but also again, that's why I think it's so important that we have more females that come out with these stories, and like in our platform as artists, like it's important for us to come out and do that and say these messages and say these stories.
Thank you, like for real. I really, really admire you as an artist.
But yeah, thank you for having me, Krista. I'm so excited to see your work. I hope other females watch this and are like, yeah,